specifically everything, right? Great. So prior to establishing his real estate career, Tim actually served 16 years as a naval officer. And after the Navy, Tim was a lead engineer in developing mechanical systems for Navy aircraft carriers and battleship destroyers. Tim has spent 8 years in high-tech consulting, advising government contractors and established companies while pursuing a master's degree in business and information management. Tim pursued his passion and launched a career in commercial real estate in 1999, and he is a very active professional in community organizations, including serving on the board of directors for the NorCal CCIM that Helen mentioned. He's also been the chairman of the Fremont Rotary Club, among a giant list of things that he's involved in that you can read about on his online profile. So without further ado, welcome Tim.
Well, first of all, Jennifer and Tom, thank you for the invitation to be here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity. A little bit about myself, as most people who practice real estate in the Bay Area, I started off as an engineer, and I really liked numbers, and so I thought maybe I can try to transition into something different after being an engineer for so long. So I said to myself, I asked myself, what can I do where I could continue to use my technical skills, and I thought maybe real estate was worth a try. So that's how I started in this career. I started as an investor, analyzed my own deals, took my first CCIM class in 2007, and 9.5 years later, I finally finished all my curriculum, built my portfolio, and got my pen. So I joke about how long it took for me to get my CCIM. It took me longer to get my CCIM than it took me to get my BS and my MS degree.
More valuable.
Hopefully it's more valuable. And for those who understand the value of it, I kind of put CCIM as getting a PhD in real estate. Let me see if I can get this clicker going here.
You could just make that work.
Uh-oh. Oops, what did I do here? Uh-oh. Okay.
Lifeline?
Did I screw everything up here?
Where's the rest of you?
He's the IT guy.
He's an officer, so you know, he's litigation.
Use the Mac.
Okay. I think you have to escape that.
I hate these.
Yes.
Command plus.
So as he's going through that and getting set up, I am the founder and the president of a company called the Ivy Group. We're a boutique real estate firm that focuses primarily on commercial real estate. So we help our clients buy, sell, and lease commercial real estate. We also have a what we call a value-added services department. We have an in-house appraiser, Andrew G. He's a MAI appraiser as well as a CCIM. So we're able to provide pretty much valuation, analysis, and negotiations all in-house. We don't really do a whole lot of lending, and for that part, we reach out to other lenders that help us help our clients finance their projects. Thank you. So which button do I push here? That one? Okay. Very good. So let's get started here. So tonight, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Ivy Group. I'm going to talk a little bit about commercial real estate leases, and we're going to go through a case study, a real life case study, starting with the requirements, going through the negotiations process, and analyzing that lease from both a tenant and a landlord perspective. And I'll try to be quick so that we can try to get everybody out by, is it 9 o'clock, Jennifer? Do I have about 20 minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I'll keep this interesting.
Do you guys want a little Q&A then?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the Ivy Group, we've been around 18 years, and we service the Bay Area. We a leading brokerage that focuses on commercial real estate using various different technology platforms to help our clients identify the best return on their investments. We were founded in 2001, based out of Fremont, and we help our clients solve their real estate problems in 5 different languages. And as a matter of fact, one of my trusted partners, Helen, and I met Helen when I took CCIM, I believe it was 103 or 104, and right after I met her, we didn't really do a whole lot of business together. We show up in meetings, says hi, and then one day I was going after a proposal that was put out by the Housing Authority of Santa Clara County, and it was a 100-unit apartment. And at that time, I could have done it myself, but then I asked myself, who can I bring in as a value-added partner? And I knew Helen had invested in commercial properties before, specifically multifamily. So I reached out to her. I said, hey, you wanna maybe go after this proposal with me together? She said, yeah, absolutely. So we went through that whole analysis she showed you. We put a package together, and we actually ended up winning that proposal. So our very first deal that we did together was a 100-unit listed apartment in San Jose.
Wow.
And ever since then, I've started to continue to work with her. We've been doing business together for 4.5, maybe 5 years, $50 million transaction volume, something like that. So the Ivy Group, we're affiliated with a lot of different organizations. The one that I'm most proud of is obviously CCIM. CCIM has been around 50 years, and it just took a lot of work to get to that level. Some of the clients that we work with across different platforms, different sectors, green tech, high tech, retail business, nonprofits, public sectors as well is some of the areas of some of the clients that we work with. So we help clients both in the private sector and in the public sector. A lot of corporations come to us when they're looking to buy a building or lease a building. So this is just an example of some of the different areas that we focus on. And as I mentioned earlier, we have 5 different levels of services. We help clients buy, which is acquisition, sell, disposition, leasing up at the top right corner. Value-added service includes opinion of values, tax appeals, and we also do property management. And so today we're going to focus on leasing, top right-hand corner. So what is a lease? What is a lease, right?
Control.
In the most simple process, it's basically an agreement between 2 entities or 2 people. And it says that if I give you some money, will you let me use your asset? In this particular case, the asset happens to be a piece of real estate. And all this is basically governed by what they call a lease agreement. It spells out the terms of what happens if you don't pay rent, what happens if you walk away, what happens if I want to sublease a space. So that's what the lease agreement covers. By the way, how many people in here actually own properties? So at some point, you probably need to deal with lease, right? I mean, other than multifamily, let's say it's like a office property, retail property, maybe an industrial property, even a piece of raw land, you gotta at some point deal with lease, right? So leases are pretty important, which is why I wanted to kind of take some time to cover this topic. And so the stuff that we're gonna learn tonight, it's gonna apply to all different types of commercial properties. Okay, so you can kind of take the principle and the concept and use it all throughout. To start off, what are the different type of leases? Over on the left-hand corner, you have a full-service lease, and in that particular lease scenario, the landlord pays for all the expenses. Typically, full-service leases are office buildings, and the only thing that the tenant, which is what I'm calling lessee, pays rent. So lessors, landlord, lessees is tenant, just so that you get the terminology correct. And then underneath, full service is a gross lease. And in that particular case, the landlord pays some of the expenses and the tenant covers some of the expenses, particularly utilities. And then there's what they call modified gross. Again, it kind of gets into technical details about who's going to pay for what. The net lease it's typically one expense that the landlord will pay, and then the tenant will cover the rest of the expenses. And then underneath that, you got triple net lease. That's the one that we're most familiar with. Triple net, the first net is usually the property taxes. The second net are the insurance for the property. And then, of course, the third net are common area maintenance charges, CAMs. And on a triple net, the landlord typically pass on all those expenses to the tenants. Okay. So in addition, as a tenant, you're going to pay your rent, and then you're also going to have some expenses you got to pay. And then percentage lease applies mostly to retail businesses. The landlord typically gives you a lower rent, and then you got to meet a certain volume of sales, and then at which point the landlord is either going to take some of the profits, or they're going to charge you a little bit more rent. And then there's also what they call ground lease. Ground lease really applies to vacant land, where the landlord owns the land and the tenant owns the building. And so typically on a ground lease, it's very, very long term, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. At the end of the term, the landlord usually keeps the building. So those are the different type of leases. This is a real client that we had. They came to us as a referral, as most business, and most clients in this business come to us as a referral. And they came to us, and they're currently located in Oakland, and they also have a facility in Vancouver. They came to us and they told us, hey, I'm a startup company. I'm looking for about 5,000 square foot warehouse. I need about 2,000 square foot office for engineering work. And they need a warehouse, by the way, to store battery. They're in the solar industry, so they help. They work with they partner with an engineering firm, and then they make the batteries to store the energy, right? And they are looking for a lease term that ranges from 2 to 5 years, mainly because they're a startup. They don't want to really tie themselves into something really long term. And location-wise, they want to be in the East Bay, anywhere from Fremont to Oakland. And they specifically need a building that has 250 amps, preferably 480 volts with 3-phase power. If anything less than that, usually those can be upgraded, but it costs money. So they also need a grade level loading door and a minimum 15 feet ceiling height. And what they're comfortable with, because they're a startup, they're looking to pay about $1 per square foot for a warehouse with whatever the triple nets are. Okay, so that's the requirement that we got from them at the beginning. So we went out and we canvassed the market, and after working with them for about 6 or 8 months, we finally found a property that was interesting to them. And look at the property size, 12,144 square foot, completely different from the requirements. So why did we pick that? We looked at literally probably 50 or 60 properties, and there was just nothing available. The market's pretty tight. So they said, okay, I like Fremont, and I can work with a larger building. And so this is a flyer that the listing agent who was representing the landlord had put out. And it seems like most of the criteria match our requirements. Move-in date, February 1st. The rate negotiable. This is the manufacturing space. It's near Fry's Electronics in Fremont, and it had 2 grade level doors, and it had about 25% office. So looks like a good fit. And so the biggest question I had was on this particular flyer, how much is the rent, right? So after calling the broker and getting some ideas from him, it turns out they're asking for $1.45 gross, okay? So keep that in mind, $1.45 gross. So we went in, we put a proposal together, and we offered $1.25 per square foot, and then typical annual increases on second, third, fourth, fifth year, and so forth and so on. In the Bay Area anyway, it's about 3 to 5%, so we offered 3%. We asked for 2 months free rent, because that's the amount of time that they're gonna need to take to build out some additional office and to upgrade their power. We did a 5-year deal, 62 months, because we wanted to do a 5-year deal, which is basically 60 months, and then we're gonna give that 2 months back at the end. So you don't really, quote unquote, get free rent. I mean, you're really buying yourself time. And the landlord likes this stuff, because you know why? At the end of 62 months, or 61, 62 months, they're gonna get higher rent, right? With the 3% increase. Lease commencement, we said we wanna start right away, and that was important for our client because they had been looking for a long time and they really are trying to expand. They got funding, and they just wanted to start immediately. And that's important later on as part of the negotiation. I wanted to put that up there. The security deposits equal to first month's rent, use, engineering, and storage of batteries, and they wanted to have an option for 60 months, okay, to renew the lease after the original term. So we submitted that proposal, and the landlord countered back, and this is what they came back with: $1.35, 3% increase. Instead of 2 months, they gave us 1 month. So the term ended up being 61 months instead of 62 months. And if you remember on the previous flyer, the landlord said that they could be ready to move in February 1st, or the property will be available starting February 1st. And after some negotiations, we figured March 1st was a good timeline because the landlord actually owns the building, they occupy it, but for their own business. They bought another building, and they were working through some permitting issues for a new building that they bought in Union City. So February 1st became March 1st. Security deposit, same thing, 1 month's rent. And the use was pretty important to the landlord because battery, what's battery?
Yeah.
Right? Hazmat, all kinds of stuff. It raised a lot of red flags. And as a matter of fact, some of the other properties we had previously looked at, the landlord didn't even want our usage because of battery. So there was a lot of hurdles to overcome. And what we worked out was if my client, the tenant, agreed to pay the premium over what the current rate is, would the landlord work with us? And they said yes. So that was a big breakthrough. And the option to renew 60 months.
Can I
So we-
ask a question?
Yes, Jerry.
Okay, so they originally wanted 5,000 square feet. They're gonna take 12. Do they have the right to sublet the remainder if they don't need it?
Yes, and that was part of the negotiations. I'm gonna get into that. Basically, what happened was they couldn't take all the space,
Sure.
on their own. So it just so happened they do a lot of business with an engineering firm, and the engineering firm is purely office space, right? So they ended up partnering together. Yeah. Yeah, that's how we made that deal
That's the
work.
way I would have thought.
Because there's really nothing out there that's about 5,000, 6,000 square foot. If there were, there'll be like 10 offers.
Yeah.
And so you're just gonna have to keep fighting to, and we didn't want to get into that situation.
Makes sense.
So we got this back from the landlord, and so our client looked at it and said, okay, let's just give it one more push. We really need more than 1 month in order to do our tenant improvement and our build out. So could we get a month and a half? Right? I mean, that was a compromise. And so the lease commencement, even though they had marketed as February 1st, well, it didn't happen, right? And now, February became March, March became May. And so we were basically making concessions from our side, and the landlord obviously needed to make concessions as well, right? And so, so my question to you is, there's the original offer, there's the counter back from the landlord, and then the tenant counter back. Out of all three of those offers, which one of the three proposal is a better deal? All right, okay, let's go back and look real quick. So remember, we went in, we went in at $1.25, right, 2 months free rent. Landlord counter back at $1.35, 1 month free rent. And then our tenant counter back at 1.5 months. So which is a better deal? Right? How do you know, right? How do you know? Based on what? Timing, rental rate? So here's what we've done, and I'm gonna see if I can attempt to pull up that spreadsheet at this point and kind of walk you guys through some numbers. So if you look at the spreadsheet, we built this spreadsheet basically based on what we've learned at CCIM. And in my career as a commercial real estate agent, I probably negotiated over 100 leases. So I took the skill set that I learned on the field and also what I learned at CCIM from an educational perspective, and kind of came up with this formula. So our original offer, we went in with 2 months, and then the size of the building is 12,144 square foot. We offer $1.25 per square foot, and then on a monthly basis, it's about $15,000. On an annual basis, $182,000. And if I took this out over a 5-year period, let me scroll down here. If I took this out over a 5-year period, see down the bottom where it says totals, the tenant is expected to pay about $967,000 in rent, right? And then over here on this particular column, you can scroll this up. In this particular column, normally if there was a triple net lease, we would put in some sort of trip number here. In this particular case, it's a gross lease, so we just kind of left that as 0. And so your total rent is going to be pretty much what the base rent is, okay? And then at the end here, there's also commission that's going to be paid out of this. It's important to the landlord to know what his commission costs are, so he can kind of factor that into his equation. So that's what we call the original offer. The counter offer.
What was the commission to the landlord? Was
The-
that 5%?
The total commission was 5%. In this particular deal, they're going to split 50-50. So the listing agent will get 2.5, and then the co-op agent, in my case, is 2.5. And commissions are paid on the term of the lease. It doesn't. They don't pay on the option period. That's typical. Okay, in the Bay Area anyway. So counter offer, they came back to us with 1 month. The size is the same. They also came back to us at $1.35, and 3% is still consistent. So purely on a mathematical basis, we went from $967,000 to now $1,044,000. Okay, so by looking at this, you would think that, okay, their counter is okay. I mean, it's going to cost my tenant a lot more money to lease the space for 5 years. Is this still a good deal? Well, I don't know. So we counter back one last time, and this is right here, a month and a half. We offer $1.35. That's fine. 3% increase. So the number didn't really change, even though we're getting less free rent up front, and I'll show you why in a minute. So we decided to put together what we call a lease analysis, okay? So if you look at here, this is a lease analysis. Your total effective rent is basically is based on this particular chart right here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to work this mouse here. Well, here, let's just look at this first. Here's the proposal. So if you look, there's the first column, that's our offer. The second column is our counter offer, and the third column is the counter to the counter. So if you look at the total rent, 967 versus $1 million, and then there's $1,044,000. Still, by looking at this purely from a numbers perspective, you would think that, okay, the second counter and the third counter are pretty much the same, right? But if you actually amortize this over a 5-year period, the numbers are actually a little bit higher. And how we calculated the total effective rent was based on the net present value of a 4.5% discount rate.
Okay, we're using that present value
Yeah.
over time.
We use the net present value because money today is worth more than money in the future. There's also inflation, right? And so we wanted to basically bring the 5-year back to today's value and said, if I were to spend $1 million on leasing for 5 years, does it make sense? Or maybe perhaps I should buy, right?
The loss is 3 months.
Okay, so that's how we came up with this chart here. Let me get back into the presentation. Okay, so looking at this chart, now you know how we came up with this number. I still can't really tell what I would want, right? I mean, which is a better deal, the landlord's deal, our deal, or the landlord's deal? And so, going to the next slide, this is where negotiation comes in. Wow, it's missing a couple columns. I wonder what happened. Okay, so basically, this column on the left-hand side is the landlord's column. This column on the right-hand side is the tenant's column. What's important to the landlord? Well, the rental rate is important. How much free rent the landlord gives out is important. TI allowance is something that we negotiate. In this particular case, there was no TI allowance. Because this is a battery storage company, environmental issue is very important to the landlord. And expenses, of course, is important to the landlord. And the timing for the landlord, as I mentioned earlier, he needed to stay put where he's at until he can get his permit squared away in Union City. And of course, the reason he's renting it out is because he's expecting a certain return on his investment, right? So his ROI is important. And of course, tenant quality is always important. Every landlord wants a tenant who's got a lot of financial backers and has been in business for a long time. In this particular case, we bring in a startup to the table. So, what's the risk that you have, right? If the tenant, bankrupts. From a tenant side, rental rate, rent concessions, TI allowance, the term is important, the parking is important, amenities being close to everything is important, and of course the property conditions is important, and the ability to sublease is important. Because as we mentioned earlier, they're unable to take the whole 12,000 square feet. So after some negotiations, and this is the part where I kind of want to maybe spend a couple more minutes. What we learned in negotiations is you don't really, if somebody offers you $10 and you say, okay, I'll take 5, and you end up at $7.50, is that really negotiations? Not really, because that's just saying I'm meeting in the middle. So what you got to do is you got to come up with a list of all the things that's important to you, and you start trading, and that's what that previous two charts, this chart and this chart is, right? You start trading on stuff that's really you can give up, right? And that's how you arrive at what we call an interest-based negotiation tactic. Instead of taking a position and just standing firm, you try to figure out what's of interest to both the landlord and the tenant. So in looking at the lease analysis, over a 5-year period, this is kind of what you expected to pay for rent. And again, you can just look at these numbers and say, okay, which is a better deal? You can't really answer it sometimes, so that's why you got to start building a chart or a list of bullet points that are important. So if I was the landlord and I'm looking at this and I'm getting rent for year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4, and if I take $16,394 and I kind of annualize that, I get $196,000. And for this particular purpose, we just apply a 25% expense ratio, and you get your NOI of $147,550. And assuming if I were to sell this property as a landlord and I can get a 5% cap, my property is worth about $2.9 million. And then with the annual increases, 3% increase in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, I could expect to sell this property for about $3.3 million in year 5, right? So my range of value is about $2.9 million to about $3.3 million, and that's how I would look at it as a landlord, right? And again, going back to the previous chart, if I was a tenant, I would look at my bottom line and say, how much am I paying towards rent? And then, by the way, this chart here is kind of what Helen just covered in her multifamily analysis. Same concept, 3 minutes left. Thanks, Tom. Same concept, we just kind of distill it down. At this point, if I was representing the landlord, I would put the numbers in here into the spreadsheet that Helen had and try to figure out a little bit more detail of what my real value is, what my IRR is, and all the things that are important to a property owner. Last chart is what we call sensitivity analysis. This basically, we ended up at $1.35, which is on the rental rate on the middle column at a month and a half free rent. So I'm expected to pay about $1,073,000 in rent. And if we would have kept going on the negotiations, the sensitivity analysis basically will kind of give you a clear idea of what you will end up with. If we push and we were trying to get 3 months free rent and continue to pay $1.35, I would end up with $1,048,000, right? So this chart kind of puts everything in perspective after all the negotiations and figure out where you need to be. So with that in mind, that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to cover. I do want to give a real quick pitch to CCIM. We have a Northern California chapter that meets every month on the second Tuesday at the Sequoia Country Club in Oakland. It's 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. I usually show up at 11. There's a book club, there's a mentoring section, and then the keynote speaker is usually around 12 o'clock. And then Helen and I have been spearheading the Silicon Valley District. For this particular month, we actually got an event next week. On Tuesday, it's going to be in Matrix Casino, and we have a very, very good speaker. He's going to talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and how that impacts real estate. And it's going to run from 11:30 to 1:30. So with that in mind, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, I think we have about a minute or two left, Tom. Is that about right? 1 minute, so I can take a couple questions.
Did you have to do anything with indemnification because we had all these hazardous materials?
Yeah, so as part of that negotiation process, we have to show a lot of things. We have to show the hazmat certificate. The good thing with this company, even though they're a startup, they actually have a Vancouver facility. So we were able to show them what we're going to do to epoxy the floors, and we show the landlord pictures, and we reach out to different insurance carriers that would take a risk like this. So we have to go through a whole process to prove to the landlord
You
that.
don't need to take indemnification, meaning if something happens, you don't have to pay later.
Identification, you said? We came up, we actually hired a third-party consultant to, if there was a spill, what happens, what do you do to clean up, what kind of process do you put in place to train employees and things like that. So there was a lot of work involved. Yeah.
If they could have got a 5,000 square foot unit, what would be the rental rate on it?
On a 5,000 square foot, depending on the area, I can tell you it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive. Because usually a smaller warehouse is going to cost a little bit more. And the challenge there is to find a space of that size.
But if they could have, what the point I'm getting at is, they're better off with a larger place, subletting half of it out, and they're at a lower rate.
Absolutely, and that was our strategy, because we did go after a couple of 5,000, 6,000 square foot warehouses. We didn't get them.
Probably $1.50, $1.75 maybe. Right?
Yeah, the stuff that we were seeing about 165, 170 for a 5,000 square foot. That's if you can find anything.
If you can get one.
Yeah. Maybe one more question? None? Okay, all right.
Cost for that, your event, the Matrix?
I can talk to you offline. Yeah. So I do want to wrap up and, respect everyone's time. Thank you for the opportunity, and hopefully,
Okay, I'm just going to wrap this meeting up. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and attention. So, if anyone is interested in participating on our BACOMM team, the best way to work a room full of strangers is to play host. And so, really, for me, I personally don't have a huge track record in history, and how do I add value? By providing a space for you all. And so if anyone is interested in this opportunity, please reach out to me. And sponsorship, yes. So as you notice, we wine and dine you, and the events that we host are free to attend for the most part. And so in order for us to continue on and keep either membership free or relatively inexpensive, we are looking for sponsors for our event.